What is going on, YouTube? Shane Black, Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com, Hook'em Horn Show. Potentially Tarek later, if not tonight, then later this week with him. But we're coming back at y'all this week. I got the Texas A&M preview. We're going to also be taking a look at the college football playoff picture. We're recording this on Tuesday night, so rankings just released for the final full week of the regular season for college football. We got number 3 Texas versus number 20 Texas A&M. This will be only the third ranked matchup in the Lone Star Showdown in the past 3 decades. Granted, again, this is the renewal of the Lone Star Showdown for the first time since the 2011 season. Justin Tucker's game-winning field goal. We pick back up at College Station this weekend, 6:30 p.m. Central kickoff time. I got an email. You get like StubHub promoters and stuff. But I got an email earlier this week saying that really any tickets within a decent view for the Texas A&M game on Saturday on StubHub this week have gone for an average of about $1,075. So kind of shows you the level of excitement for the atmosphere that's going to be there at the game this weekend. And I mean, this been brewing for over a dozen years now. I'm excited just to have it back. You obviously got larger stakes around this game than just the rivalry game being back itself, because the winner of this game faces Georgia in the SEC championship game. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I think there's a good chance for Texas. You win this game, no matter what happens in the SEC championship game, you've locked up a single-digit seed in the playoff. So,
yeah, I mean, what more can you ask for? We've been waiting for this rivalry to come back, and then at the beginning of the season, when we're previewing the schedules, talking about how awesome would it be if this game meant more to the national picture than just the Lone Star Showdown. So I'm pumped. I think discourse around this Texas team from some of the fan base has been a little toxic of late in regard to going after Ewer's performance and things of that nature. But he can silence the critics with a big game on Saturday, and that's the beauty of this rivalry. Is a guy like Justin Tucker obviously turned into one of the best kickers in the history of the NFL, but no one's gonna forget that kick. So plays that you make this Saturday night, no one's going to forget them, especially with the stakes this high. And so I don't think Aggie losing to Auburn on Saturday really takes any of the luster out of this one at all for me. If anything, it's good, because unless Texas A&M wins the SEC, I don't really see a world where they're getting into the playoffs. So kind of results of last week around the country, in my mind, regardless of what happens this Saturday, have solidified the Texas Longhorns as a playoff team. And so now, you're almost playing with a little bit of house money. You still have all your regular season goals on the table, beat your rivals, win the SEC, win the national championship. And so I think, Texas fans maybe not as happy as they would like week to week with how the team plays. I think that's a bit foolish. I mean, we're 10-1 going into the last week of the season. If you would have said this was the scenario at the beginning of the season, I'm pretty sure most fans would take it. So I think, as the hecticness of this week ramps up and, the Twitter wars and everyone, throwing smut on each other, I think just taking a second to sit back and realize where we are, number 3 in the country for, 4 weeks in a row now. The Longhorns are in a great spot heading into this renewed rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, Texas A&M can't really afford to lose any more games this season to make the playoff. They would probably have to win the SEC because they're already at 3 losses. Having this rivalry game back, I remember pretty vividly, I think my first time watching the Texas A&M rivalry game all the way through was the 2007 game. I think that was a close loss for Texas, but kind of one of those in between years for Colt McCoy, and that was his first full year as second full year as starter. But frantic comeback in the second half. Still game with a crazy atmosphere in College Station. I also think that was one of those 3 ranked games that the Lone Star Showdown had. Watched the game pretty much every year thereafter. Been a big college football fan for a while, so it was always on my bingo card every year to catch that game. And now that it's back, I mean, I feel it feels different because I've covered Texas whether it was on the beat or for the site since 2016. So when I started with the site, it was not too long after the rivalry had gone dormant, and now we're kind of out on the other side. And I'm personally, and you know feel free to express your opinion differently, but I'm more excited for this game than I am for Red River, at least for this year. Um, I don't. Maybe that changes in years in the future, but also I think A&M's just a better team than OU this year, and getting the rivalry back after 13 years speaks for itself. Um, Also this week we have Thanksgiving. I wanted to get to this a little bit before we get into the preview here, because you mentioned something that I have noticed also very much on social media for the past 2 weeks. Honestly, I felt like I've needed a social media cleanse myself. But yeah, there's a lot of Longhorns fans out there that have really been coming for Quinn. Um, I myself actually posted on the X account on during the game last weekend because I really thought it was probably time to put Arch in the game in the second half. I still think that's the case with A&M being next weekend and Texas having that double-digit lead against Kentucky. I just didn't think it was worth Quinn getting hurt further. Did you agree with that, or do you think that?
No, I do. I do agree with
Okay.
that. I think but the only thing is, from Sark's perspective, is I mean, like you mentioned, it's already a shitstorm with the fan base on Twitter regarding Quinn's performance and Arch behind him. So if you do that, even if it's like game in hand type of thing, you just kind of create more controversy. And I mean, Arch did or Sark did that in the Georgia game and was able to kind of fend off the media in a sense. But I understand why he kept Quinn in there, but I do agree with you that it probably wasn't the smartest decision.
Just from the injury perspective, like, yeah, and given you got A&M the following week, so. But yes, I want to go through really quickly and again because there has been some toxicity from the Texas fan base here for the past couple of weeks. Three things that each of us are thankful for from the Longhorns this football season, because when Texas got their, and this will be my first thing, Texas has their second straight double digit win regular season under Sark. Haven't lost a road game since 2022, and I mean, I guess this is all kind of under my first one, but Sarkisian's got this program in a place where they've been a consistent top 5 ranked team in the college football playoff for the last 2 years. So my number one is just the back-to-back double-digit win regular seasons. I think my number two is Jahdae Barron. He's been spectacular this season. Highest ranked cornerback in the SEC, or highest graded cornerback in the SEC, excuse me. Having the type of season where I think he can end up being probably a day 2 NFL draft pick if he continues on the pace he's on right now. I think my number 3 is having having all 3 rivalry games back. The Arkansas game, a little bit of heart palpitations in the second half, but we got through that. The OU win looking pretty good now, I guess, after they just dominated Alabama last weekend. Actually, both the OU and Florida wins have started looking a lot better for Texas recently. So yeah, and then I guess my honorable mention on the similar theme to Jahdae Barron is Anthony Hill. I have also really enjoyed seeing him, I wouldn't say come into his own, but really elevate his game this season, be potentially the best linebacker in the SEC, and a guy that definitely was snubbed from the Butkus Award finalist list yesterday. I did an article on that snubbery, but Butkus Award is just kind of more of an upperclassman respect thing, I guess. I don't know. I did the research. There hasn't been an underclassman that has ever won that award, so I guess that's why. But anyway, those are my 3 things.
So for me, I'm going to look to the offensive side of the ball for the first thing I'm thankful for, and three guys stand out: Gunnar Helm, Trey Wisner, and Kelvin Banks. Helm, when we lost JT Sanders to the draft, it was where's that production going to come from? Not only has Helm, been the leading receiver for the Longhorns this year, but he's filled in perfectly for Sanders, like no dip at all. He's come up big in big games. Trey Wisner, when CJ Baxter and Christian Clark went down, the talk was, all right, Jaden Blue's going to have to shoulder the load as our RB1. Wisner has come in and turned himself into RB1 and has been really great in the past couple games, running through the tackles. Just really tough player. And then Kelvin Banks, I think, goes without saying. He'll be gone after this year, but 3 seasons on the 40, starting at left tackle. You're gonna realize how good he was when he leaves. One of those guys, and I'll throw Matthew Golden in there too. Played every game this season. Stickies for hands. Leads the team in touchdowns. Makes clutch catches. Obviously, Isaiah Bond. All the talk was about him coming in, but I think Golden's pound for pound been as impactful as Bond. And moving on, second, I'll go with the secondary. Last year, the secondary kept Texas from the national title game, and it really kept Texas from a perfect season. It cost them in the OU game, especially on the last drive. It cost them against Washington when Penix torched them up. Bringing in Makuba, like you mentioned, Jahdae Barron coming back for the 5th season, Michael Taff, and Derek Williams goes down, but Jelani McDonald steps up brilliantly. Malik Muhammad on the outside. Gavin Holmes has played well. So having a really good secondary, and really good might be an understatement, honestly. Like one of the best in the country, one of the best units that we've seen on that side of the ball, in the past decade in college football, always making big plays, always coming up with turnovers. And third, I'm going to go with the addition of Johnny Nansen. I think losing Jeff Choate, was pretty big, but Nansen has come in and has filled in brilliantly as a co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. As Anthony Hill, first season with the green dot, really playing, like you said, like the best linebacker in the country. Leon Galafau really come into his own this year. David Benda, Maurice Blackwell filling in their roles as upperclassmen. So I think the linebacking room at the beginning of the season, we did have some question marks, especially regarding the depth. Ty Anthony Smith, a guy who was a highly coveted recruit, but has come in and the snaps that he has seen, he's looked good. And I think a lot of that credit has to be given to Nansen for how quickly he's been able to develop. So I think being able to mask the departure of Jeff Choate with a guy like Nansen has been great. So, that'll be the last thing I'm thankful for the Longhorns.
Yeah, I like those. You don't really think about Johnny Nansen, but obviously had a big impact on Texas defensive front this season, which has performed quite well. I mean, the defense as a whole, number 1 ranked unit in the nation in adjusted defensive efficiency this season. Number 1 pass defense and number 1 total defense in the SEC. Heading into this weekend, and we'll get into the preview now. I've got confidence in this game, more confidence than I probably thought I would have had if you had asked me, say after the Arkansas game. And I'll give you 2 broad reasons why, and then we can dig more into the specifics here. For one, we just talked about it with the reasons why we're thankful for Texas football this season. The defense, Texas' defense has been the backbone of this team this season, and the consistency with which they played. I mean, you figure last weekend only allowed 1 touchdown. The other one was a scoop and score kind of fluky play from Quinn after he was injured with the ankle. I've been blown away by pretty much every level of the defense. You mentioned the secondary. Pretty much every position's been solid there. I think they match up pretty well with A&M, and that kind of leads me into my second reason, and that's because I don't trust fully or really at all the A&M run game outside of Marcel Reed. They're down Ruben Owens. We'll see if he plays this weekend. I've seen some stuff about that he could make his season debut, but I think he had it was supposed to be a season-ending knee injury, was it, in camp? But they're also down Le'Veon Moss for the season, who was their premier running back. Amari Daniels is a decent back, but they don't have much beyond him. And their running game has relied so heavily on Marcel Reed, and I think Texas is going to be well prepared for handling Marcel Reed. He's a dynamic player, and I think a good quarterback. But if they can limit Reed, then I think they're going to do pretty well. Problem for Texas in this game potentially could be Quinn Ewers' health against a really good A&M defense in a hostile environment. Um, I think those are kind of the main storylines heading into the game. I'm also interested to see the health of the receiving core for the Longhorns. Again, we're recording this on Tuesday night, so we don't have the first injury report yet. That'll come out tomorrow. I am a little concerned about the health in the receiving core. Isaiah Bond, DeAndre Moore, both on limited snap counts last week. Bond still dealing with that ankle injury that he had against OU back in October. And then, DeAndre Moore also dealing with a lower body injury here for the past couple of weeks. You mentioned Matthew Golden stepping up, Gunnar Helm as well. Ryan Wingo, I think, will be heavily involved still. Does the receiving core injuries, does that, kind of concern you at all, or kind of how are you feeling about that?
Definitely. Yeah, I think you'd be foolish to say no when you have two starters out. We saw when fully healthy, Isaiah Bond is one of the fastest players in college football, and his ability to stretch the field, regardless of if he's making plays or not, really takes the attention of a defense. And then DeAndre Moore kind of turned into a nice security blanket for Quinn, almost like Jordan Whittington was last year. And obviously his toughness and willingness to block cannot be understated. Texas and Sark love to run the screens, whether it's to running backs, tight ends, receivers, and Moore is the most willing and best blocking receiver on this team. So that's huge when you run that many screens. So obviously Ryan Wingo has been great. Matthew Golden has been great, like I said, but Wingo's still a freshman. Silas Bolden, I think, can certainly play a lot of snaps, but you almost want to use him more in a gadget role rather than having to start him or rely on him to play 40, 50 snaps a game. So, yeah, I think, having two of your best receivers hurt, certainly, even though Texas is really deep at the position, certainly, it is a little bit of an issue and something to monitor. And, something, I'm not going to go all doom and gloom here, but something if Texas were to lose this game that you can look to yourself and try to take a positive away and say, hey, we're not going to be playing for another, 3 to 4 weeks. These guys now have the chance to get healthy. We don't have the SEC championship. We're very likely going to be a playoff team regardless. So, that's a little bit of copium that you could take away from a potential loss. But it definitely an issue nonetheless.
I mean, both teams are dealing with injuries this week. I mean, we're in the final week of the regular season. You would expect this to be the case. For Texas specifically, the wide receiver injuries, I'd agree, especially with Bond's speed. That, and honestly, just Ewers' inability to throw the deep ball here recently. A&M's got a pretty good run defense. They're solid along the defensive front. Their defensive line, I don't think, is as dominant as we've seen it be in some years here recently, but it's a solid bunch up front still. As a whole, their defense is solid. They're averaging about, and specifically at home, they're not letting up much on the ground at all. They allowed 24 rushing yards against LSU. Now, granted, LSU's offense was a nightmare in the second half against A&M. Their run game outside of Caden Durham has pretty much been non-existent this season too. And then, Mizzou also, I think a lot of people remember that game. Texas A&M just dominated them a couple of months ago in College Station. But I think that matchup between the Texas ground game and the Texas A&M defensive front is one that I'll be watching this weekend. Texas is really clicking at the right time, I think, with the rushing attack. Wisner had a career day, first game over 150 yards in his collegiate career, had 158 and a touchdown last weekend against Kentucky. Texas rushed for 250 yards against Kentucky, a season high. That's a physical Kentucky defensive front that has some really good linemen. I thought Texas's interior offensive line was playing fantastic. Kelvin Banks blocking on that left side of the line, fantastic. I would ask you this because this is kind of what I've been like mulling over this week. Do you have more confidence in the Texas ground game against A&M's defensive front or the passing game against A&M's secondary?
It's a good question. I would say the passing attack. You mentioned Ewer's inability to hit the deep ball. I think that could rear its ugly head on Saturday just because I don't think you're going to put together 4, 5, 6 methodical drives against this defense. I think it's going to take some explosive plays to beat them over the top. And I think they can be had. I mean, we've seen that. Peyton Thorne looked really good against A&M last week. And if anyone that's watched college football the past couple of years, the struggles that Thorne often has on Saturday. So I would say, despite the success of the running game against Kentucky, I would say I still have more confidence in the passing game. That said, that 15-play, 86-yard drive where it was all rushes to end the game, I think that does wonders for your confidence. Obviously the game as a whole, your best rushing output of the year is great, but that final drive where Kentucky knew you were going to run the ball, everyone in the stadium knew you were going to run the ball, and you were still able to do it. I think that just gives the running room, Wisner, the offensive line, just everyone a ton of confidence. But I still think if Texas is going to win this game, you're going to need a strong game out of Ewers. You're going to need him to throw the ball down the field. Something that's been talked about a lot. So I think overall, I think the one thing that has gotten Texas in trouble in the Steve Sarkisian era is going away from the run too early. And we've seen that in games that they've struggled, even that they've won this year, that, Sark has kind of abandoned the run game, and you'll see it on the first drive of the third quarter where he'll come out and run. I think from the get-go, you want to try to establish at least the rushing attack, but that's just to set up the pass. Because if the A&M defensive front can pin their ears back and come after Quinn Ewers, who's not going to be 100%, that poses a lot of problems. So I think both are important. I will say the pass game is more important to the overall success, but I will be looking for the running game to kind of establish themselves early.
Yeah, I agree with your point about how Texas will have to set the tone in this game. And the path to victory, I think, for Texas here, you're probably looking at 1 to 2 scoring drives that are mainly driven off of explosive plays. And I think the explosive, in terms of explosive plays, I think you're more likely to find those in the passing game here than you are on the ground. A&M ranks 89th in the FBS and explosive passing plays allowed this season. So there's clear opportunity to beat them there. And honestly, I think that's a way that potentially you can look at Sark in this game and say, hey, this is where your expertise can really help Texas jump ahead and, get the crowd quiet early. And, with Quinn coming into this game with kind of a gimpy ankle and, there's just no chance he's going to be at full health for this game. But, with that, I think that, the game plan is going to have to be pretty scripted. Not going to have to be, but I think Sark's going to have a pretty set script for this game for Quinn for the first few drives at least. A&M probably knows that. Does that help? I don't know, because in these big games, especially some of these big road games, Sark's had some magical plays dialed up, and this might be one of those. We'll see if Quinn's able to execute it, how hurt he is, but one thing I do feel confident about in this game that I wouldn't have if, we were playing this rivalry game, let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is that I think there's multiple quarterbacks Texas has that can win this game for them if need be. I think Quinn gives you a better chance of winning than Arch clearly, even if he's at 80, 90% instead of 100. But I think Arch can still win you this game because he can really extend the field for you and that dual threat element to his game. I think A&M is going to be ready for a lot of the intermediate passes, some of the underneath stuff. One thing I'm interested to see is how Texas can attack the A&M defense with Gunnar Helm. I know you mentioned him earlier. A&M's kind of struggled to cover up the tight end this season. They rank fourth from the bottom in the SEC in opponent tight end yards per game this season in conference play. I mean, Helm, over 50 yards, 2 touchdowns last week. This season, he's over 500 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. I think this could be another big game for him. It'll be his one and only A&M game probably, and I think that he'll be able to make the most of it. I don't think that it's going to be as big of a week for Wisner on the ground. I think he can get involved in the receiving game. I think Jaden Blue, I think you try to get him involved in the receiving game a little bit more this upcoming weekend because, well, he's fumbled the ball less as a receiver than he has as a running back. That's for one. For two, again, they give up explosives. Jaden Blue is your best big play hitter at running back, hands down. So, and I have faith in the offensive line in this game. I think they'll be able to protect Quinn pretty well. A&M's got some solid pass rushers, no doubt. Nick Scourton off the edge is scary. They've got guys that can get pressure, but I don't know how many more guys they have that can get pressure on you than, say, other teams Texas has faced, like a OU, like an Arkansas, teams like that, other rivalry games that you played, because OU and Arkansas also both have really good pass rushers, edge rusher types, So, and I feel like the offensive line has only gotten better as the season has gone along.
I'll ask you this. Do you think Arch, for whatever reason, do you think Arch will take a snap on Saturday?
I'd lean toward no, but I mean, if I was making my own market on this one, my own market odds, I'd probably put it at 30% chance just in my mind. I don't know. I don't know if that really matters, but I think Quinn, it seems like a lot of the indications are that he'll be healthy enough to go. Mm-hmm. That said, he's been injury prone. We know that. And again, we've seen Arch in big games already this season. It's not like you're putting in. It's not like it's unexpected if he has to go in, So I think he'll be ready. Basically, if Sark has to, I don't think he's going to be afraid to do it.
Yeah.
That said, it's not like this game. You mentioned, Texas potentially getting 2 losses here. It's not like that's a season ender, end all be all for Texas. If they end up with 2 losses, they're still fine. They're still probably in the playoff. So does that give Sark more confidence to stick with Quinn? Even if the game is close or Quinn's struggling a little bit, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I think that we probably don't see Arch, but again, you never know. I mean, one snap away from Arch having to be ready. Do you have anything else you would mention for like the Texas offense versus the A&M defense?
No, I think we covered it all pretty well. I think for both offenses, the money downs are going to be big. What do you do on 3rd down? What do you do in the red zone? If and when it comes to 4th downs, what do you do there? I think both head coaches are going to be aggressive here. Early 4th and shorts around the 50-yard line. I think they're going to be going. So can you stop those on the defensive side of the ball and flip the momentum, or can you pick them up on offense? And yeah, I mean, we hear about Kyle Field. Obviously there's that very funny clip of Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler, and the Bear. I don't know if you've seen this, Andrew, from a couple of years ago, talking about Kyle Field and basically saying, do they ever even we talk about it as this daunting place, but do they ever even win big games there? Very funny clip. Go look it up if you haven't seen it. But I think the fans are going to be ready on Saturday night. So kind of seizing the momentum whenever you can is big, especially early. But I have confidence that the offense can put up points. I mean, just look at the Auburn game last week. The Auburn offense has been poor, to say the least, all season. I know it went into quadruple overtime, but still they scored over 40 points in regulation. I think it was over 30. So I feel confident that the offense can score in the 30s in this one.
Okay. I don't know if they'll get to the third. I mean, they might. That's my concern in this game, is that it's a lower scoring contest, and you end up maybe getting a few fluke plays here or there. Texas really has. I guess the last thing I'll say about the offense, and this is really why it concerns me, is the amount of, I'd say, meat left on the bone this season for the Texas offense. I'd say every single game since, outside of the Florida game, probably every single game since the beginning of October, I have like, doing my takeaways, I have always felt that Texas had a lot of missed opportunities on offense. Now they've scored a lot. They've been a good offense this season, one of the best in the SEC scoring wise and yardage wise. But an offense with this much talent, this good of an offensive line, it could and probably should be better in most of these games. Yeah. Part of that is due to Quinn's injuries, other receiver injuries. Part of that I feel like is just lack of execution. Quinn not being able to hit the deep ball sometimes. Fumbles, I should add. Okay, so the defense, Texas's defense versus A&M's offense. I don't need to spend as much time on this one because we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think the biggest thing in this game is how does Texas handle Marcel Reed? How do they match up? Because Marcel Reed will probably be, just ballparking it, 70% of A&M's offense, I would assume, because I think whether it's through the air or on the ground, using his running ability, I think they're probably going to give him between 40 and 50 plays this weekend. We'll see how well Texas is able to possess the ball, because they've had a lot of long drives recently, in recent weeks. And, if they can keep Marcel Reed on the sidelines and, really wear down that A&M defense in the second half, great. I think that means that you're probably winning the game by double digits at that point late. But, yeah, I think a lot of this game is going to be on Marcel Reed and how he's able to get the ball to some of their playmakers. Is Terry Bussey a major factor here? Does Amari Daniels have a big game for them? Jabari Barber, these sort of guys, Ja'Day Walker. Is Texas able to, continue to defend explosives well as they have this season, stop the run, handle Marcel Reed? Because if you don't handle Marcel Reed, that's where this game can really get in an ugly spot for Texas.
Yeah, completely agree. He's raised the ceiling of this offense significantly with his dual threat ability and his ability to, hit the deep ball. Like you mentioned, I think it's Texas being so good against explosives is a massive advantage here, because A&M is going to be looking for those deep shots. And we talk about momentum. That's how you get momentum clearly on your side. 70-yard touchdown passes, run after the catch type plays. So, I think it'll be big. I think what gives me confidence is, the few dual threat quarterbacks that Texas has faced this season, they've been really good. And I don't think you've faced a dual threat quarterback as good as Marcel Reed. But just the team speed, especially in the front seven, with your guys on the edge and your linebackers, it's hard for the quarterback to run against this front seven. I think that's where PK, that's where Johnny Nansen come in. Just having these guys prepared for anything, gap integrity, things of that nature have been really good. So I agree with you. I think Elko's going to trust Reed in this game and kind of going to turn it over to him, especially if they get down early. It's going to be, hey, Reed, we need a superhero performance out of you. And we've seen him play really well in spots, but he's thrown an interception in each of the last 3 games. is, prone to that. I think the Texas secondary very opportunistic. If they start out playing well, and if A&M gets down, and Texas A&M is going to have to throw the ball to get back in the game, I think you're going to see, at least one, maybe two interceptions forced because of the opportunistic nature of the secondary and just how the game script is going. I mean, to me, this is a game that Texas can win in a multitude of ways. This is a game that Texas A&M probably needs to follow the script from the beginning, get momentum, not fall behind early. Because if they do, and then you're just really relying on a redshirt freshman quarterback to go Superman, that's not super sustainable. It's not out of the question because Reed is really talented, but against this defense, not super sustainable.
I think the one thing that could be encouraging here, and you don't want to be the first ones to do it, but Marcel Reed has yet to really have a game where he had like a lot of passing attempts that A&M's won against like good competition. I mean, if you look at it, he's had over 25 passing attempts in 4 games. 2 of them were wins over Bowling Green. Even the Bowling Green win was closer, a lot closer than it should have been for A&M. What was that, a 1-score game? New Mexico State, easy victory as you would expect. But then Auburn and South Carolina. Now, those 2 were on the road. Auburn is a team that looks much more formidable down the stretch. A night game at Jordan-Hare, regardless of how good or bad Auburn is never easy in the SEC. South Carolina, also a very good team, as we've learned as the season's progressed. But, the 2 games that he's been in where A&M won convincingly was Florida on the road, and he had 17 pass attempts in that game, 13 rush attempts, so pretty even split almost. And then LSU, which he gets in the game in the second half, and 9 rush attempts, 3 touchdowns, only 2 pass attempts though that were both deep shots. So we have yet to see against a really like quality team Marcel Reed show that he can handle 50 plays a game and win. Texas will test him there. I'm not saying he can't do it, but like you said, it's a lot to ask from a redshirt freshman quarterback against Texas's edge rushers too. That Taylon Green, Marcel Reed's faster, but Taylon Green is also a solid dual threat quarterback, and Texas contained him very effectively. Even I would say to a certain extent, last weekend, you saw Kentucky's quarterbacks trying to roll out a good bit, and, Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill, Trey Moore having none of it. So, Anthony Hill was able to get a sack without even touching the quarterback on one of those plays, really. Brock Vandegrift just saw him coming and just kind of went to the ground. Yeah. I'm not, A&M, there's not really that many threats that they have where if they get the ball in their hands that I'm really all that worried, maybe outside of Terry Bussey. It wouldn't surprise me if Colin Klein had something drawn up for Bussey, maybe out of the backfield, maybe a screenplay, something to try to get him out in space. You mentioned the deep shots for A&M, and that is something they can do because Reed has a pretty strong arm, can throw the ball downfield well. Especially as they've gotten him more worked into the offense. And even when Wegman was more of the starter this season, granted, they've really turned away from him. They've really started to become more of a methodical dink and dunk offense. That's more of Colin Klein's style, I think. That's what you saw a lot from him in past years. And I think that's probably what they're going to want to do to Texas this weekend, because I think that's probably how you beat Texas's defense. We have yet to really see an opponent wear down Texas's defense like late in a game. The Georgia, even the Georgia game, Texas's defense was tremendous. They didn't lose that game because of the defense. The run defense probably could have been a little bit more physical, but I mean, they got 3 interceptions, didn't allow a single passing touchdown from Carson Beck. They did their job. And yeah. I've got a couple of questions, but other than that, I think I'm pretty much good on the Texas defense versus the A&M offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit on a good point. Like the skill players on A&M are not that scary, especially in years past. Like you think last year with Evan Stewart and Muhammad and Le'Veon Moss, guys like that who, the latter two are, I believe it, both injured this year. But there's not a lot of guys who really scare you. You did mention Terry Bussey, who has been used in the backfield. He's been used a lot over the past couple of games and in the backfield, just looking to give the offense a spark. So he's definitely a guy to watch this weekend. If you follow Texas recruiting, that was one that went back and forth, and one you kind of wish you could add back because he already looks like a special player. But in general, especially against this secondary, I feel pretty confident that are they going to hit one over the top, two maybe potentially, but I don't think this is going to be something where Marcel Reed is just picking apart the defense because one, I think the Texas secondary is too good, and two, I don't think A&M has the skill players to really do that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have that Anais Smith type anymore that would have scared me a little bit. I mean, I guess Terry Bussey is, I guess, their new de facto skill weapon, like, that multi-phase skill weapon that can be lined up in the backfield and a wide receiver like Smith was last year. Yeah, I'd mostly agree with you there. Also, A&M's offensive line, I think, is good. They got some experienced guys up front, but I think Texas's defensive line probably has the matchup edge there. That is something I wanted to mention because I talked about the linebackers, secondary, and defending Marcel Reed, but I didn't say anything about the defensive line. Lole, Collins, Broughton, all having really solid seasons. We touched on the edge rushers. Okay. One question about the defense against the A&M offense for you. Do you think Texas gets an interception this weekend?
I do. Yep. I think game script wise, you mentioned it in games, that A&M looks good. Reed doesn't throw the ball a lot, but I think that he's going to have to. I think Texas is going to come out and take an early lead, and they're going to force A&M to try to beat them with the pass. And that's where I do think Reed will get himself in trouble, as I already mentioned, one pick in each of the last 3 games. So,
yeah, I mean, so let's see here. Yeah, when A&M loses or is net neutral in the turnover battle, they are 1-3 this season. So,
I could see a game. I could see this, Jade making a big play. 5th year, just announced as a Thorpe finalist, wearing the number 7, only game against A&M. Like I could see him coming up with a big interception in this one.
Yeah. Sorry, I should mention 1-3 in 1-3 against P4 opponents. 2-3 if you want to throw in the Bowling Green game. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a huge deal if Texas can, force multiple turnovers potentially. Texas has been just hawkish in the secondary this season. I've been really surprised at how easily almost it seems for Texas to get interceptions this season, and pleasantly so. But I mean, that Jelani McDonald pick was just like acrobatic last weekend. Makuba, multiple picks this season. Barron, 4? Yep. Anthony Hill's got 1. So it's not just the secondary, but yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think they probably get 1 or 2. We'll see. Maybe a fumble. A&M has not fumbled it much this year. 3 fumbles that they've lost on the season. But if they return Ruben Owens, they also, and again, those 3 fumbles, 2 of them have happened since Le'Veon Moss went down for the season. So we'll see. They also haven't faced as many defenses as good at turning the ball over as Texas. So I'd put the over-under at 2 that Texas can get this weekend. A&M has yet to turn the ball over 3 times in a game this season. So that'd be great if Texas could get it to 3. Then I highly doubt A&M would be in a spot to win. All right, so we can go and give our score predictions, and then we'll talk playoff. I don't know yet. I'll let you go first because my
Okay,
brain's a little
that's
burnt out
fair.
at the moment.
I said earlier I'm confident that Texas can score over 30. And confident's probably the wrong word. I am going to predict them to score over 30, but yeah, probably not confident that that happens. I'm going with 33-20. I think this is going to be a
Okay.
game, in Kyle Field at night. A lot of college football plays. Silas Bolden, he did muff a punt last week. Luckily, he fell back on it. He's going to be amped up, as we've seen all season in the return game. I get nervous every time he fields a punt. So knock on wood that he secures all of them. But I think you're going to see whether it's special teams really impacting this one, defensive touchdowns, a lot of turnovers. We're just going to see college football plays under the lights of Kyle Field. I think Texas takes an early lead, kind of keeps it at 7 to 10 points for most of the game. Could see A&M giving an early second half charge, and then the offense really quieting them late third, early fourth quarter. So I'll go 33-20 Horns.
I said that I would have a hard time seeing him get to 30 earlier, but yeah, I'm going to go 31-27. 30-27, 30-27. I went with 31 a couple of times this season. I should have done it and didn't do it last weekend. Almost had it. But yeah, in terms of some of the small things in this game, I have a hard time seeing this game not being close. Like you said, if it's not close, it's because one team is just turning the ball over a bunch, I think. Yeah, I mean, I I think I think A&M getting to 27 means that they're running the ball successfully with Marcel Reed, but also I agree. I think that there is a touchdown, whether it's special teams or defensive, that A&M gets. I think that they actually scored 3 touchdowns all in different ways. I think one of them they find a way to get a guy like Walker, maybe Noah Thomas, or especially Terry Bussey loose for a big play somehow. And then I think that Marcel Reed probably has a rushing touchdown in this game, and then I can see them with a special teams or defensive touchdown. Just because Texas, again, a lot of missed opportunities because whether it's scoop and score, pick six type play, something like that. So yeah. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about, college football playoff. Tarek and I, we don't need to go as in depth this week because we will have our playoff preview show here before too long. And actually, about a week and a half. And so we can have 2 weeks. And so 2 things I'll ask you. First one, and I'll kind of give my answer to the first part of this question. Do you think Texas, if they lose this A&M game, still makes the playoff? And then where do you think that would put them? Now, I say that obviously it matters how much they lose by. And then if A&M wins this and the SEC championship game, I think Texas is still going to be a pretty high seed. There's always that possibility.
Yeah.
Now, assuming that you look at this realistically, if Texas loses the A&M game, it's probably a close one, and then I assume more than likely A&M would lose to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely scenario, if that were to be the case, I would put Texas as probably a 9 seed because I think they're probably going to be lower than Penn State, probably lower than Georgia or Tennessee. I don't know. The Tennessee conversation is an interesting one because Tennessee has more ranked wins. Where, Texas, yes, does not have multiple losses yet, but in this scenario, they would. Also depends on if Tennessee can beat Vanderbilt. That's not a given this weekend. So yeah, I'll go 8 or 9.
Yeah,
I think is where that would put them.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was having them at 9. I think they would fall behind Tennessee just because Tennessee can look at that Alabama win, and even though they lost to Arkansas, I think the committee will take that Alabama win and say this is a bit better So that would be a really unfortunate spot for Texas because then you're going to have to, and in this situation, Tennessee's probably the 8, and then you're going to have to go to Neyland, and then if you win that, you're going to have to play the number 1 seed, likely either Oregon, Ohio State, I guess potentially Georgia. So, that would be a very tough path. So that's just another reason why you really want to win this game. I think, as we mentioned at the top, the chaos of last weekend, almost guarantees Texas a spot, unless even if they got, I guess if they got stomped by A&M, but I don't think they're going to fall behind a 3-loss Alabama or a 3-loss Ole Miss. I think they're pretty safe in the field, regardless of result on Saturday. It's one of those things. I mean, you'd probably rather be, an 11, a 10, 11, or 12 than be in that 8-9 game. And, you're kind of playing with fire there. And, if you're like a 12, you'll probably have to play Ohio State. I don't think you'd fall that far because of the Big 12 champion. But it's one of those things where seeding is going to become important, just like it is in the basketball tournament. And if you look at the current bracket that was just released tonight with Texas as the 2 seed and SEC champion, their side of the bracket looks really nice with the Longhorns playing the winner, Notre Dame, SMU in the first round, and Miami, Penn State, Indiana as the other 3 teams on that side, whereas the other side of the bracket has Oregon, Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State. So it's going to be a lot about the bracket, but, I think Texas is probably safely in regardless of result. And if they do fall, I agree with you. I think they'll be at that 9 slot.
So let me pose the question to you this way. With the way the bracket looks right now, is SMU the team you'd want to play?
SMU or Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, I really don't know. I think SMU would be my answer, but I think that Texas could do pretty well against Notre Dame.
I agree.
Texas and Notre Dame are actually pretty similar teams on defense.
Yeah, Notre Dame is really good on defense. I think that's the best unit out of SMU and Notre Dame. Riley Leonard, I'm not confident that he'd be able to have any success in the air against Texas, but in a game where
I guess Notre Dame's ground game is pretty dynamic.
Yes,
yeah.
and it's going to be like a do or die game. Riley Leonard's going to run the ball 20 times, and he's a tough SOB. I would take my chances with SMU there.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, I guess actually, yeah, if you're looking at it, Indiana, Penn State, SMU, Notre Dame, factoring in the Notre Dame ground game, that actually, I think they'd probably be the team you'd want to face the least out of those 4. I'll tell you this, the one team that like I don't have faith in them to beat or lose. I have no idea what they're going to do heading into every game. I just know that their quarterback's going to go crazy. I think Miami would be a tricky game for anyone.
Mm-hmm. So I agree. Yeah.
I think Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, any of those would have. I actually think the one team that could match up pretty well with Miami is Tennessee, because I think Tennessee's got speed everywhere on defense.
Yeah.
And I think that they're one of the teams that would be able to neutralize Cam Ward better than most.
Yeah, Miami's one of those teams with Ward. I'm not picking them to win the college football playoff because they're going to
falter somewhere.
Exactly. He got lucky against Cal, survived that. Obviously faltered against Georgia Tech. But Cam Ward can win you any game too. So that's kind of the scary part of that. And, if SMU or Clemson even wins the ACC, Miami's still likely in a 2-loss team, especially with the chaos we saw last week. But that would create a very interesting first-round game if Texas, lost A&M, Miami lost, and you ended up playing Miami in the first round.
I could almost guarantee that there's going to be a collision course between Ohio State and Oregon pretty early in the playoff, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think more than likely, I think at a neutral site, Ohio State probably actually beats Oregon, and then that probably bumps Oregon to the 5 seed. And then, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Ohio State beats Oregon at a neutral site. Let's say Texas wins out. Oregon or Ohio State would be the 1 seed there, I think. I think the
Yes.
selection committee's made that very clear.
Yep. 100%.
And so, and I think they made it very clear in that case that Oregon is the hands down 5 seed.
Yep.
I think they would try to rewrite the rules to make them the 2 seed if they could. Selection committee loves themselves the 2 best Big Ten teams, and rightly so. They've been very good this season. But, I mean, jokes aside, I think for the playoff right now, I feel good about where Texas is at, because even if they're an 8 or a 9, that's a tough one. If somehow they manage to get to like a 7, because then that probably means that the 2 seed is like someone you faced, like a Georgia.
Yeah.
Or
yeah, I think the question, we'll have this conversation after this weekend, but if Texas were to win, what would be the lowest they could fall? And I'd be curious to see if you have an 11-2. I think what we're going to see is the selection committee not punish the losers of the conference championship games, especially in the Big Ten and the SEC. So I'm not even sure a 2-loss Texas, if that second loss is to Georgia again, would fall below Penn State. Like, I think you could feasibly see Texas in the 6 if they were to win this weekend and then end up losing to Georgia in the SEC title. The 6 would be a very good spot.
Unless you're Drake. Sorry. Never mind. Throwing a rap beef jab in there. That was really corny. Anyway. So yeah, I think, okay. So really quickly, and I say really quickly, but my internet's kind of struggling here. I was gonna run through the All-State playoff predictor thing.
Mm.
Because I think it was just updated for today. Maybe it hasn't been, but it's still got like the updated games on here. So we'll see really quickly what it projects.
Okay.
So we're saying here that they lose to A&M, 88% chance to make the playoff. Honestly, I think that's probably a little low.
Yeah.
Compared to what you would be seeing.
I don't think a 3-loss Alabama is going to be seated higher than a 2-loss Texas.
Yeah. Also, it has Oregon in the 6th spot. I don't think that that's possible.
No. They're not going to.
And I'm not just trying to say that, because I think if Texas managed to somehow draw Oregon in a first-round game on the road would be crazy.
They're not going to punish the losers of the big conference championships.
Yeah. Who does Oregon face this weekend?
Washington,
right. Oh, it's got a little glitch there. You see they replaced there we go. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I was confused for a quick second. 11%.
Yeah. The Washington Longhorns. So yeah, I mean, I think Jed Fish is a good coach. I think he's done okay at Washington this year, but yeah. So it's saying that Oregon, this is weird because yeah, I wonder what changes that, because I think realistically this is what you're looking at here, but also the playoff predictor now has South Carolina in the 10 spot and no Texas at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No Big 12 team either.
Oh, this is doing a bunch of simulations. It's saying that Penn State is your winner. Wait, no Big 12 team?
No. Tulane out of the AAC and Boise State out of the Mountain West.
Oh, Jesus. I never even... that thought never even really occurred to me, that the Big 12 might just not have a representative at all.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
That would be the wildest, just looking at it from the like the Texas viewpoint.
Yeah.
Man. That would be a massive failure for that conference. Okay, so I think that's so enough of the playoff predictor. That thing is just kind of wonky, honestly. Yeah, I guess I would say that, yeah, Texas, if you get a 10, even hell, I think if Texas got the 11 seed, I'd probably actually prefer that.
Yeah.
It depends, right? Like if you're the 11 seed, because then you have to travel for that first game, but you're probably facing maybe a Penn State. That on the road in December seems rough, but I don't know. Probably overthinking it right now.
Yeah, there's
I
so much
just
that can change in the last week and then conference championship Saturday. So it'll be
yeah.
interesting to watch play out for sure.
Let's end on this. What is the one team, like, just from like a fan perspective, you would like to see Texas face in the
Hmm.
playoff? Like their first game, first round, whatever.
Hmm. That's a good question.
It's not one that you think of very much because this is still very
Yeah,
new.
I think I think playing Penn State for me personally would be cool because I have a good amount of family members that went or go to Penn State.
Mm.
Um, so that would be interesting. And James Franklin always struggles in big games, so that would be fun to be able to pile on to that one. I also have a buddy who one of my best friends went to Indiana, so I would enjoy just crushing Indiana in the first round. That would be a lot of fun. So a lot of these are more personal than anything really Texas related. Um,
I see that. I think for me, I would like to see. There's one condition here. I'd like to see Notre Dame, just from a fan perspective. I'd like to see either Notre Dame or Tennessee. Tennessee with the asterisk that for whatever reason Texas and Tennessee don't play each other like for the next season or two in the SEC. I'm sure they will eventually in the next couple of years, but Tennessee's not a guaranteed opponent. You got the three
mhm.
rivals, and that's it. Um, I think that again, Tennessee's got a good defense. I think both stadiums would be a really good atmosphere, and orange versus orange. Um, yeah, Notre Dame. I think again, getting to see that before they go on the home and home here in starting in 4 years.
Yep, yep.
Um, I think that would be cool too. So anyway, I think that's about it. We've been going for a little while here, so um, like I said, we might have a video here later this week just because Tarek wasn't able to make it tonight. Yeah, anything else before we get up and
No, everyone
rolling for
enjoy the
today?
holiday, and if you're
Yeah,
going to be in a split house regarding the maroon and white and the burnt orange and white, best of luck to you on this Thursday. Try to keep it cordial.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's cool that this is back. In-state rivalries. You still got a good number of them this week
Yeah.
because you got again the Egg Bowl on Friday. That's a big one. I mean, obviously, you got Ohio State, Michigan. Might as well consider that an in-state rivalry. Georgia, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Kentucky. I could go on. Tennessee,
Yep.
Vanderbilt, just another one in the SEC. Clemson, South Carolina is probably the one I'm really excited for outside of Texas and Texas A&M because that could have playoff implications. I mean,
Hmm.
we talked about it. I would not be surprised if Miami somehow slips up against who they face this week, Syracuse.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, Syracuse is a good team. Former A&M transfer quarterback there, I do believe. Yeah, Kyle McCord. Was he A&M?
Ohio State. Ohio
Ohio
State.
State. That's right. I'm
Yeah.
thinking Kyle Allen all the way back.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, McCord's having a great season at Syracuse. Um, anyway, yeah, enjoy some turkey, y'all. If you eat turkey, ham. Ham's not Thanksgiving. That's Christmas.
Yeah.
I need to get to sleep, dude. Um, all right, but yeah, I'll come back a little bit more energized later this week, I'm sure. Excited for another weekend of college football. Good week of college basketball too. So, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller, Hook'emHeadlines.com, Hook 'em Horn Show. That's pretty much it. Hook 'em.
Hook 'em.